Well, I want to welcome Greg White, who's the Chief Counsel and Chief of Staff
Yes.
for the Massachusetts Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation. And I never remember the business regulation part of it.
Well, after the show, you'll have it down.
That's right, I'll have it down. So welcome again.
Thank you.
And wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the various scams that we all encounter and how your office is trying to help us at least become aware of some of these scams.
Sure. Well, as we talked about, our office has a lot of specific mandates, one of which is we oversee the consumer hotline. And we have 4 students from Northeastern that oversee it and take hundreds of calls a day. And many of the calls that come in has to do with scams that are out there. And so I asked my students to provide me with a list. Some of them have been around from the forever. The IRS scam. Everyone's heard of it, but we still get calls. A lot of them, the victims are elderly, who get these calls, and the format is they call and they say, we're with the Internal Revenue Service, you owe back taxes. If you don't send us money, a warrant will be issued for your arrest. And believe it or not, people are still sending money.
Well, they hear IRS.
They hear IRS, but the reality is that's not how the Internal Revenue Service works. Now that there's a takeoff on that. Now they're reaching out to the immigrant population and they're saying that if you don't, you're going to be deported. And so, you know, the IRS is probably the most well-known scam. The grandparent scam, are you familiar with that?
A little bit.
You know, and again, talking during the show, social media, you know, your life, my life, if you're on Facebook or any of the numerous social media outlets, is out there, you know. So what they'll do is they'll go online and access your Facebook, and they'll find out that you have a son or daughter studying abroad. You have a grandson or granddaughter studying abroad. So they'll contact you in the dead of night, and they will say, you know, we're calling you from such and such jurisdiction. Your son or daughter, and they'll have their name, and they'll talk about friends in the school that they go to, enough information to sound convincing. And they'll say, you need to send a money order for $5,000. Now they're using gift cards and Bitcoin. It's, you know, and, or they'll say, I'm a lawyer and I'm representing, and you need to send money so your son or daughter can post bond. We recently had a member of our office whose mother-in-law lives in Texas. Her grandson was studying in Atlanta, Georgia. She got a call in the dead of night saying, you know what, your grandson has been detained. You need to wire $2,000 or he's going to go to county jail until the matter's been resolved. Next morning she gets up, she goes to an outlet. It was a reputable one. Our Division of Banks is training them and working with them in terms of how to identify these scams. And he said, ma'am, I'd like to take your money, but it's a scam. She promptly left there. She went to a less reputable one. They took her $2,000. Turns out to be a scam. Now she's looking to be reimbursed. It's not going to happen. You know, so that's the grandparent scam. The charity scam, you've won a lottery. All you need to do is pay taxes.
Send money.
Yeah. The Boston Globe did a series on it last year, and they had one guy who had lost $100,000, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
He had been called by number one, you know, send $10,000 and you'll collect your $1 million. And then the 4th call he got was, if you join the association, you can collect all 3. Believe it or not, people are still being victimized by that. The One Ring scam, are you familiar with that?
No.
Okay, so that's what they do. There's a group operating out of the Caribbean. They will call your cell phone. They'll let it ring once. If you're like most people, you're not able to grab it on the first one, or you see there's a missed call. You want to know who called you. You call them back. Don't tell me how, ask me how it's the particulars, but the way it works is, the longer they keep you on the phone, the more they ring up a bill. And it's an international call. And this past year, I get a call on my cell phone. Like most people, I reach out to them. And one of my lawyers came by, and I mentioned to him, he said, oh, I hope you didn't call him back. And I said, I did. He said that's the One Ring scam. So,
Oh, wow. I
so-
wasn't at all familiar
yeah,
with that.
the National Grid scam, they call you and they say, you know what, we can lower your bill doing different things.
Oh, I get 2 or 3
You
calls
get 'em
every day.
all the time.
Every day.
Yeah. The Microsoft scam, you know, your thing's about to run out. Ransomware, I'm sure that's the cybersecurity conference that we had. I mean, the stories you hear from individuals, they'll say, you know, my grandmother, this one guy, one law enforcement officer told us at this conference that his grandmother lives in New York, and she was a victim of ransomware. And what they'll do is you'll go on a site and they'll have malware there and they'll infect your system. And they'll contact you and they'll say, listen, you need to wire or send by Bitcoin X amount of dollars, or we're going to delete all your family photos, all your documents on it. In this one particular case, it was around Christmas time, and they wanted $500. So they gave her 24 hours, and she had been able to come up with like $450, and she reached out to them, and she said, I just need time to come up. Believe it or not, they had a little bit of a heart. They gave her another 24 hours, but then they took her
Such
5
nice folks.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice folks.
But that's the way it works, and,
That's crazy.
it's awful.
And do all of these or most of these perpetrators work from outside the country? Again, these people I want to send to jail.
The IRS, there's a group operating out of upstate New York, out of Washington. You know, it's I've gotten at least a dozen calls in the last year, and then I'll engage them. You know, there was a thing that was shown on YouTube not too long ago, where a police officer on one of the departments, not here in Massachusetts, but somewhere in the United States, he gets a call on his cell phone. Now he's working dispatch. He's in uniform at a police station, and the IRS call is saying, we have a warrant for your arrest, and he's looking around, you know.
So it affects any of us.
Exactly.
All of
And
us.
so what we advise consumers, listen, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. And more importantly, take the information like the grandparents. We're not saying that it never happens, you know.
That's right.
But it's not likely that they're going to call you at 3 o'clock in the morning and they're going to ask you to send 4 gift cards to, you know, Europe. All right. So just common sense goes a long way. When
Be
dealing with
aware
this.
of all these things. And it's getting to
Absolutely.
the point where I don't want to answer the phone anymore.
Well, again-
Use voicemail or an answering machine. and-
Exactly, and it goes a long way to at least insulating you from these callers.
Well, that's not great. It's great information. It's not great to know that there are so many things like this going on.
Well-
But thank you for coming and sharing what your department does
Yeah.
and sharing with people. Just another reminder, don't fall for these things. Like you said, if it sounds too good to be true,
It probably
It
is.
probably
And again, I will provide the number. So if you are a consumer and you have an issue with home improvement contract or the do not call list or data breach, or any one of our entities, whether or not it's insurance, banks, standards, professional licensure, telecommunications and cable, call our office. We have consumer units within all these offices, all of these agencies who can help you and assist you with your issues.
great. Well, thank you very much for coming.